Hello?
Okay, we got to get to the front here.
Okay. All right, so just bring another chair down.
Good morning, everyone. Morning. Thank you for being with us yesterday afternoon, and great to see you again this morning on a beautiful day. I'm going to start by passing the mic over to Julie Eklund to offer our welcome. I'm Jenna Cullinane-Hagee, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding, and we're going to be talking today just in the university group about some updates to the system. We're going to also share kind of a new way that we're looking at some of our accountability data really focused on completion and looking at improvements over the life of the plan from 2015 to 2017. And showing some comparisons by peer group and by region, and hearing from some institutions this morning who are kind of in our, had some of the largest growth that we've seen over the life of the plan so far. So with that brief overview, I'm going to hand it over to Julie to welcome, and then we'll do some introductions.
Thanks, Jenna. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Julie Eklund from the Strategic Planning and Funding Division as well. And Jenna has done a lot of good work putting these meetings together. We really appreciated everyone participating in the groups yesterday. In fact, we were talking this morning. We were floating amongst the groups, and every group really had different conversations going on, which really made the case for us that this regional work is important. You know your own context. You know your infrastructure, the groups you have that are working across institutions that you can leverage kind of what's happening. So it was actually really helpful for us to see, hey, yeah, this is important that we're doing this regional work, and this is important that people are connecting and they're really thinking about what their issues are, what their concerns are, and I think that's really going to make a difference statewide for our ability to reach our goals and really to make a difference across the state. Again, it's the work that happens at the institutions that makes a huge difference in terms of reaching our goals, but we know it needs to be more than just the institutions. Obviously, it's a student-centered plan. Students have a role. The business and industry community has a role because we really are focused on how students are doing when they leave higher education, making sure those jobs are there for students. And K through 12 has an important role too. And so, you know, clearly I think it's pretty obvious in the three areas the groups were focusing on, why we chose those three and how really across those areas you can see all the key stakeholders are going to care, or it's going to matter to the business and industry community that we have an educated workforce for the jobs that are building there. It certainly matters to students and institutions that we're able to work on completion and do a better job with getting students to and through higher ed. And for K-12, it really matters to them that their students are successful, that they're able to get the preparation they need to go on to higher ed. I know in the accountability for K-12 now, there is a focus on higher education enrollment, and you know we've certainly worked with K-12 for them to understand that means at a lot of different levels. It means some students going to universities, but it also means a lot of students pursuing two-year degrees, technical degrees, workforce certificates, those types of things. So again, all those stakeholders are important, but really our institutions are at the core of all this work, and we so much appreciate that you came out early to have those conversations. So I'm going to hand it back to Jenna, who will lead us through the morning. Feel free, it's nice to have today to have this smaller group. Feel free at any time to jump in with questions. I know that worked really well with the community colleges yesterday. I think in terms of breaks, we've got a couple points in time when you'll be talking together, and so there should be some natural points for you to get up and take a short break if you need to. But we've got a lot to get through this morning, so I think we'll try to keep moving. Again, thank you all so much for being here and participating in this important work. And again, thank you to those who don't normally come to accountability meetings. as sitting in the sessions yesterday, you can see why having our IR folks is very important, but also having people from other areas of the institution is critical as we move forward with this regional work. Thank you.
All right, so just a few housekeeping items to start. My understanding my understanding is that we're having a little technical issue this morning, so hopefully we were hoping to have people on by phone, and I know in particular that may affect one or two folks who were going to do some presentations who are remote. So if you're listening on the webcast, we have not ironed out the telephone issue. So you can hear us through the webcast, but we can't hear you through the phone. So if that changes, we'll let people know. But for now, just go ahead and listen through the webcast and watch, and we'll update you if we can. Also, any technical issues you're having, this is the email address. Luis Martinez is the person to email if you're having any connectivity issues or any questions that come up that you want to participate in. That's the best way to let us know what's going on with you. So if we'll switch back to the regular slides. Also, I sent out the materials, the presentation from yesterday afternoon and today via email, but it was a very large file. I actually got a lot of bounces. So if you did not receive the materials in your inbox, the best way to get them is go to the coordinating board homepage, so the THECB page, and at the top it'll have an events, in the live streaming or the events section, and just go to the accountability meetings and you'll be able to find them. They're posted there. So if anybody had trouble with that, I know some people got caught in the spam filter. Okay. So I mentioned this yesterday. We have quite a few people that participated yesterday afternoon and again today, so we're delighted to have so many people in person. We really feel like we can have a different kind of discussion. We want to have a two-way discussion. We don't just want to be putting information out at you. And some of the spirit of this meeting was inspired by how many people are familiar with the work of Georgia State and some of their very impressive increases in graduation rates and closing of achievement gaps across race and ethnic groups and also gender? And so talked to administrators from that particular institution, and one of the things they talk a lot about is the strategic use of data. It's not enough to know that the data are there. You actually have to engage conversation around them. And so some of you have heard me say this before, but sometimes data feel a little bit like the treadmill that sits in your house that you may not get on very often, but today we really want to get on the treadmill and work up a little sweat. So that's what we're going to do today, is not just talk about that the data are there, but really want to think hard about what we're learning from the data. The two things are a little bit different. I already highlighted this. So the regional emphasis is a new thing and just kind of an evolution of where we are with the plan, and want to kind of seed that regional work throughout our conversations about 60 by 30 techs going forward. And also the top improver analysis. Want to think about displaying our data and talking about it in a little bit different way than we have in the past. And you've already heard from Dr. Julie Eklund. I do also want to introduce Bill Abasolo. You'll be hearing from him in a few minutes about updates to the accountability system. He's the Director of Strategic Planning and does the very, very heavy lifting around the accountability system. So he is very busy from December to now, and may take a breath in next week. So anyway, his team does a fantastic job. I see a couple of folks from his team here as well. Diane Ergel and John Dinning, both contribute to the work on the accountability system. Want to acknowledge them. And also Luis Martinez, who is our data training specialist. Those of you who were data fellows, you may know him from that. And so he's out in the field often talking about data, our data resources that we have available. The kind of last introductory thing, and then we want to hear from you and have you all introduce yourselves, is to just go over what we're going to do this morning. We're going to, after the introductions, we're going to hear from Bill to give us some updates on the system and sort of status updates on where we are on the goals and targets of the plan. We're also then going to go into that top improver analysis, hear from institutions, and then plan to wrap up by noon. One of the key pieces on the back of your agenda, and you'll also see it listed up here on the slides, are the meeting objectives. And closed with this yesterday, but for those, just want to make sure it's fresh in your mind what we're trying to do together over the course of this two-part session. Is we really hope that people leave feeling knowledgeable about the state and institutional progress towards the goals and targets of the plan, particularly in that area of completion. We also want you to be aware of the accountability system changes and updates that have been happening over the last year and other additional plans for enhancement. We want to make sure that you're strengthening connections among your peer group. That's why you're seated by peer group today. I do notice we have some very vacant front row seats here. So folks who are in the chairs in a minute when we transition, you're very, very welcome. Poor Mark is lonely up here by himself. So strengthening peer group and regional connections, and then also to make sure folks are knowledgeable about that regional target process and what the expectations are going forward. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and I'm going to pass it over to Bill. And again, welcome people in chairs. If you want to come forward, there are 5 seats up here as we adjust and transition. So. Oh, actually, I forgot introductions. We didn't do that. Let's stop. This is a great time for people to move and talk. This is a great time for people to move and talk. So I'm going to start down here and just ask that you introduce who you are and your position, if you would.
Pat Cutchins, University of Houston, Clear Lake, Office of Institutional Effectiveness.
Kathy Matthew, University of Houston, Clear Lake, Interim AVP for Academic Affairs.
Antoinette Curl, Texas A&M San Antonio, Director of Academic Advising.
Sam Shi from University of North Texas at Dallas. I'm the Director of Strategic Analysis and Reporting.
Mark Stout, University of Houston, Victoria, Institutional Research.
Sharon Bailey at University of Houston, Victoria, Institutional Effectiveness.
Cristina Cortinas, Texas A&M, University San Antonio, IR.
Carol Tucker, University of Houston, Downtown, Institutional Research.
Nosley Dyer, also University of Houston Downtown, Institutional Data Analytics.
Randy Hawkins, Angelo State University, Accountability.
Chris Stewart, Angelo State University, Visual and Performing Arts.
Hector Govea, UT Permian-based Interim Director, Institutional Research.
Stephen Duffy, Texas A&M International University, Associate Provost.
David Allen, Texas A&M International University, Institutional Assessment, Research, and Planning.
Good morning, I'm Wade Schaefer. I'm the Provost at West Texas A&M University.
Javier Garza, Enrollment Management at Tarleton State.
John Gardner, Prairie View A&M University, AVP, Student Success.
Greg Marsh, Lamar University, Institutional Research Reporting.
Karen Hall, Stephen F. Austin State University, Director of Institutional Research.
Vicki West, Institutional Research, Texas Tech.
Rebecca Lewis, Institutional Effectiveness, UT Arlington.
Ashley Ferguson, UT Arlington, Associate Vice Provost for Student Success.
Tammy Wyatt, University of Texas at San Antonio, AVP Student Success.
Steve Wilkerson, University of Texas, San Antonio, IR.
Miguel Ramos is Interim Associate Provost for Planning and Analysis, University of Houston.
Susan Moreno, University of Houston, Institutional Research.
Funda Karapınar Riley, University of Texas at Arlington, Director of Analytics.
Up here.
Good morning, Jason Simon, Assistant Vice President for Data Analytics and Institutional Research, University of North Texas.
Good morning, I'm Alexandra McCullough, Allie. I am a Senior Data Analyst in Data Analytics and Institutional Research at the University of North Texas.
I'm Beth Waste. I'm the Associate Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness at Texas State.
I'm Joe Meyer. I'm Assistant VP for Institutional Research at Texas State University.
Al Walser, Manager for Reporting and Analysis, UT Austin, Institutional Research.
Good morning. Jeannie Gage, Executive Director, Financial Aid,
A&M Corpus Christi.
Good morning. I'm Katie Bontrager, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, Planning and Institutional Research.
Reginald Crockham, Texas Southern University, Executive Director of Institutional Assessment Planning and Effectiveness.
Madeline Justice, Associate Provost, A&M University Commerce.
Miao John, Texas A&M Kingsville, Institutional Research and Assessment.
Joshua Adams, Texas Women's University Assistant Provost for Student Success Initiatives.
Hi, I'm Mark Hamner, Vice Provost in Institutional Research and Improvement at Texas Women's University.
Ruby Stevens Morgan at Prairie View A&M University, Director of Institutional Research.
Thank you for befriending Mark. I really appreciate that. Up here in the front. Well, thank you. As you can tell, there are quite a few institutional research, IR folks, and those are the folks who have been core to this accountability group for many years. And we really wanted to encourage institutions to think about also folks who are thinking about student success or leadership of the instructional side or student services side as well this year as we talk about some of the strategies that are related to the changes that we're seeing in the numbers. So want to welcome folks from different roles as you've joined us here today. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to pass it over to Bill. Are you ready to kick off your part? Wow.
Luis is checking.
Let the soft shoe routine begin.
We're going to wing it here for a second and see if we can get this going.
Well,
I can work from back there so that I can see.
I do.
Okay. So we thank you for bearing with us for a second while we get this straight.
Are there pieces that are more updates and less slides?
Okay, can everybody hear me? All right, so thank you all for coming. I see a lot of people I know and people that I don't, so it's fun to meet new people and see new faces in the crowd. And let me just start off by asking, how many people were at TARE this year that are here right now? Okay, a good... Oh, yes, are there people who are not familiar with the acronym or the organization TARE? Texas Association of Institutional Researchers. If I didn't get that right, somebody can correct me, but I think that's what it stands for. So some of the information that we're touching on today, I talked about with a group at TARE. We have some updates included today that we didn't discuss at TARE. I'm working from the assumption that people are familiar with 60 by 30 text and the goals and targets of 60 by 30 text. So the plan was launched in 2015, and now we're into 2018. So all the times that I've talked and shared information with people, for a long time we were always explaining what the plan was and what the goals and targets were, and I think we're past that now, hopefully. But if anybody in the room isn't familiar with the goals and targets, we encourage you to go to a website that we have, 60by30text.com, fairly straightforward. Easy information about understanding the plan, how it was put together, what the goals are, what the targets are, and there's also some visual presentations on tracking data there showing how, in a visual format as compared to accountability, which is more a tables and spreadsheets and structures like that. But if you go to 60by30text.com, you can see some graphs and other interesting ways of looking how we're tracking the goals and targets of the plan. So what I wanted to share with you, and are you guys seeing it on the TV screens? Because I can see over there that it looks like.
Yeah, and there's a small remote. Do you have any remote?
I have this one to change slides.
Okay, there's just one that's blank on it. Got someone coming who will get the screen.
Okay, I think Luis has that particular remote in his hand. Let's see if we can get that real quick. Thanks, Jeff. It's on the, it's on the left side of the remote, and it says blank. Yeah, it's like watching grass grow, right? Well, so So what I wanted to share with you just right out of the box is a little information about, we got a new year of data that we posted in accountability, certified certified by all the institutions in January, and then we did our part of crunching all the numbers. And okay, we're back on. So I'm going to move over to the podium where it's a little easier. Okay, thank you guys for bearing with us on that. So the chart up on the screen just shows you how we're tracking the data. We're 3 years into the plan. We have 3 years to present so far. The first one, as you sort of read the chart, again, I'm not going to go too deeply into the goals and targets, but I wanted you to know that there's 4 overall goals, right? And so there's 4 blocks on the chart. And if there are any targets underneath the goal, they're all also represented with that goal. So we have the educated population goal, which is about attainment. We have the completion goal in the center there with some targets underneath for specific populations and for high school to higher ed. We have a marketable skills goal, which right now we're tracking working and enrolled within a year after graduation. And then we have a student debt goal, and it has a couple of targets underneath it as well that we'll take a quick look at. But that's reading the rows on the chart. And then across the top, as you can see, there are 3 years of data. So 2015 is when we launched the plan. 2015 is when we set our baseline. And when you look at the column, it's titled 2015, and I consider that the accountability year 2015. It doesn't mean that every piece of data on there is from fiscal 2015. It is what was most current at that time when we published it and we had available to us. So something like completions is from fiscal 2015, but something like working and enrolled, which you have to graduate, then work a year, then there's a data collection, then we get it, it lags behind. But we use the same one each year at the time, so we carry forward with something comparable from year to year. So just a couple of things to note here. I'm not going to go through every piece of data on this. You guys can do that. But a couple of good things, and then one thing that we're watching for. Educated population, our overall goal, for the state is 60%. Everybody has a higher ed degree or certificate by 2030 at Texas residents. 60% of Texas residents have a higher ed degree or certificate by 2030. So we had an increase from 2017 over 2016 of 1.3 percentage points, and now we're up to 42.3. So if we maintain that level going forward, we should be able to hit our target, or hit our goal. So that was really encouraging to see that. That was an improvement over the increase from 2016 to 2015. So we'll be looking at that, and that's showing good progress. So we were really happy about that one. Overall, completions went up, and they're going up at a nice clip, and we think we're doing well on trying to hit our goal for 2030 of 550,000 degrees or certificates, associates, bachelors, and masters awarded in 2030. So we look good there. One thing I wanted to point out about African American subpopulation is that in 2016 we saw a very slight decrease from what we saw in 2015 in terms of completions for that population. And so this year we were watching to see if that was a trend that was happening or what might be going on, and we saw a rebound. And in comparison to 2016, we rebounded by 5.7%, or from 38,000 to roughly 41,000. So we took we dived into that and tried to see, okay, what was that? Was that something that really happened? Was that a blip? What was going on there? And what it appears to be is that it's more of a reporting issue than what might have been happening out in the field. In between 2015 and 2016, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but there was the closure of some institutions that report to us, like ITT closed. There's also that was the year that NC SARA really kicked in for institutions that could opt to report to NC SARA rather than reporting directly to us. So those institutions that have an online presence that previously had been reporting to us, but they met the criteria for reporting to NC SARA instead of reporting directly to us, stopped reporting to us, reported to NC SARA, and NC SARA at this point isn't tracking completions, so we lost those. So we saw that dip, and it really showed up in the African American population. That stayed stagnant or just dropped a little bit. So with that stabilization, we didn't see a lot of people moving to NC SARA this year. That kind of stabilized out. Then the increase in that population, or the growth in that population that we saw in all the other sectors, carried the day, and they're back on the way up. So we just wanted to make people aware of that was more of sort of a data reporting blip than an actual trend downward. The other one I wanted to point out was high school graduates enrolled in Texas higher ed. That data doesn't come to us from TEA in terms of who the public high school graduates were until this month. So we'll analyze that this month, and then we'll post that. And that will be the cycle every year, is that it will lag behind our post in January or February. We won't get it until May, so we'll update that. We are keeping an eye on that one because that was one that was trending in the not direction that we wanted. As hopefully all of you know, the target for that one is that 65% of public high school grads will enroll in Texas institutions of higher ed by 2030. And in 2015, our baseline year, we were at 52.7, and in 2016, the data came back with 51.9, so it was slightly going in the wrong direction. And that's a carryover even from the year before the plan, where it was 54.2, I think it was, then we saw 52.7, then we saw 51.9. So we're going to watch that one carefully, and if it continues to go in that direction, I'm sure you'll hear about initiatives or other things or other discussions on how we get that going back in the right direction. All right.
Bill, can I hop in on a couple of those? Just a little color commentary. Especially for the high school to higher ed rate, we have done a deep data analysis led by Josie Brunner on our team, and we have a data insight brief that we've put out, or will be putting out very shortly about this. And basically, the top line story is that while we see enrollment in higher education across all the sectors increasing, it's not increasing as fast as the high school grad population. The high school grad population is growing very fast, and so percentage-wise, we're not keeping up. So that's why we're seeing that decline in the rate. And I think that feels surprising to institutions, because you feel generally a lot of institutions are seeing enrollment kind of generally as a state trending up, and it feels like we're making progress in that area, but it is just kind of interesting to see how fast that high school grad population, and that we're not collecting all of them. Two things that people point out right away when they see that decline is they say, oh, more people must be going out of state. We're losing more Texas students. That actually isn't the case. We got National Student Clearinghouse data for the last 8 years, and we see that that is very stable. We have not seen a jump, and so that doesn't explain the decrease we're seeing here. Also, dual credit is the second thing that people mention. And so far what we see is that students who participate in dual credit are very likely to come into higher ed. So they are actually some of our population that's most likely to come in. They're not diverted. Even those who complete a certificate or associates are very likely to come into higher education for subsequent higher ed. Mm-hmm. So a couple of things there. On the African-American completion, also it's interesting, this phenomenon of what's happening with the career schools particularly affected that subpopulation. So it's just something to keep in mind, that there is a market of students out there who we're either not seeing or are disproportionately going into career schools, that we may want to think about how bringing them in, making sure that they're well served by public and independent institutions as well. The last thing I wanted to mention is we got a lot of questions yesterday during the regional discussion about the difference between the 60 by 30 goal and the completion goal. And these are great questions, and I just want to cover a few of them. So one is, people confuse these all the time. So these are great questions that we want to surface. So for the educated population goal, we are counting people. For the completion goal, we are counting credentials. For the educated population goal, we have the 25 to 34-year-old, all the residents 25 to 34-year-old, wherever they were educated, in Texas, out of Texas, anywhere. For the completion goal, we're looking at institutions of higher education and counting the number of credentials conferred, certificates, associates, bachelor's, master's. Another difference is that the completion goal is a snapshot in a particular year. So for 2017, we are looking at the bachelor's degree that was awarded for a particular student in that year. And so that 550,000, that is in that year. That's not cumulative building up over time, okay? Then for the educated population goal, one student, well, so let me say, on the completion goal, so a bachelor's, someone completes a bachelor's in 2017. Let's say in 2 years later, they complete a master's degree. So in 2019, they get counted again. So that one student could be counted for each credential. For the educated population goal, one student who had a bachelor's degree, they're already a yes in that educated population goal. If they get a master's, they're still just a yes. We don't count them again because they got another credential. They just got, they're already in that group of someone with a post-secondary certificate or credential, okay? let's see, there was one other question. Oh, and then the sources of data was the other difference. So educated population goal, because we're looking at all residents in the state, we get actually that information from the American Community Survey from the Census Bureau. So that is, a census or a survey is literally, sampled out to anybody who lives there. We don't know if they were educated in Texas or if they're from Texas or any of that. So they give us a sample of who indicates that they have an associate's or above. We do complement it with a little bit of THECB data in that we do a proxy for certificates because federally they don't collect information on certificate completion. Compared to on completion, we are 100% using coordinating board data and the institutional data that you report to us to count the number of credentials. So I think of this sometimes as when you think about the health of your heart, you might look at your blood pressure and you might look at your heart rate. Those are two different ways to give you a picture on your health, and that is what these two things are. I would think of educated population as a little bit more of the blood pressure measure, and the heart rate, kind of that productivity rate information, is the completion goal. Okay? So any other questions? Clear as mud, those differences.
And I want to add one thing I heard in the groups yesterday, that it's we did look at duplication when we were looking at the completion goal. Obviously, it's the overarching goal is the 60 by 30 goal, and it's going to be really important for us to increase our completions if we are going to get to our 60% in terms of our educated population goal, our overarching goal. So we did, as the planning efforts were happening, we did look very closely at the relationship between those two, because obviously the more folks that we get through with credentials, the more folks in the 25 to 34-year-old age range who will have those. And we know a lot of those people did get and will get educated in Texas. But we also understood that there's duplication as people earn credentials over time, and in the completion goal, we're looking at completions just as Jenna said, in a snapshot in a year. But we did some analysis to see how much duplication we'd seen in the prior 15 years as we were thinking about where do we need to be as a state on the completion goal to really know that we're going to be able to reach that 60% goal. Again, we had to also factor in some things like whether we were, how many students we were importing into, how many individuals in that age range we were importing into the state. Right now we're a net importer, really important piece of that, all of that. But we did look at that duplication. If we start to see changes, we're seeing more scaffolding, people earning more credentials, we're going to go back and look at that analysis. And if it starts to look like now most people are getting more credentials on their way along, that's going to affect that completion goal and that number where we need to get to in terms of reaching our overarching goal. So this will be a living plan. We'll be looking at that, and if there needs to be a readjustment there will be. And I know this is more detailed than we usually share with people, but I think because we have a lot of IR folks and there were a lot of discussions yesterday about how does that all play into this, I wanted to make sure people realize that we did take a look at that. We used past patterns to come up with where we needed to be in terms of completion, but that is something we'll revisit. Was that helpful, I hope?
Hey, I agree. Can we see like a show of hands of people who feel like they're really familiar with the goals and targets already, or whether we need to do more explanation of how those came about and some of the methodologies behind them? Like, if you're really familiar with it, raise your hand so I can get an idea. Okay. Need guidance along the way when we talk about these issues? Okay. Well,
all right, I have one more.
I was on the track of just sharing our data update, but if there is more information that's needed on the methodologies, we definitely want you to raise your hand and say something if it's out of context.
Yeah, I think this came up because we heard so many questions in the breakouts, and just one last example because I like examples. So if Amazon comes to Austin, for example, and all of a sudden they are recruiting people from out of state, more people come to work at the new Amazon headquarters in Austin, Texas, that would, for example, increase our educated population goal potentially, but not increase our completion goal. Yeah? Okay. So.
Yeah, it's literally a survey where we count heads in who's living in Texas in that time. And if they report to you what their highest level of education is, on the U.S. Census, they get counted in educated population. It doesn't matter where they got their education, whether it was in Texas or somewhere else. So we know that creates sort of as institutions, you can't be entirely in control of what the educated population goal has in it, right? You're not controlling who comes or where they get educated or anything like that. You're working at your institutions. So we know that part, but you know completions feed into that, right? So if you're awarding completions are growing and people are staying in Texas, then that's feeding into the educated population goal. Some people will leave, some people will come. We know that that all plays a part in it. So like Jenna said, it's two parts of monitoring the health of the educational status in Texas. Any other questions at this point? Because I want to make sure that if there's anything that people want to know about the methodology behind how we're tracking of these, they get a chance to raise their hand. Okay, I'm not really going to go through in depth the last two on the working and enrolled or those under student debt. I'll touch on them just briefly to say that those are more maintenance goals that we have, right? So working and enrolled, we're looking at tracking students after they complete within a year. Are they working or are they enrolled? And in an institution of higher ed that reports to us? Or are they working in a way that the Texas Workforce Commission reports data to us that we can track that they're working? And that has been stable around this high 70s, 80% range for a long time. And so that's a maintenance goal that was set at 80%. Right now we're at about 78 point. This needs to be updated because we're making a slight change to that methodology, which I guess I'll go ahead and share right now. Right now, it's at 78.4 you see on this slide. We're changing that to 78.8 statewide because one thing that we discovered over the last year was that in our methodology, we were including anybody that was receiving an award from all the institutions that we track. And it was brought to our attention that there's a small subpopulation in there of graduates who are incarcerated. And this affected certain schools more than others. If they served that incarcerated population, it was very difficult to find them as working and enrolled after they received an award, right? So we thought that made sense too, and so we adjusted that. And it only really affects about, I'd say, 9 to 10 schools, and most of those are community colleges, but we felt that was the right thing to do, and so we're gonna go ahead and make that adjustment. So you'll see this number change from the slide.
The other thing I'll just briefly mention about working enrolled is we're hearing about more students entering the gig economy, that people are the data we have is from the Workforce Board, and it's those people who can be tracked. And so if someone's self-employed, people are picking up contract work, we're not able to capture that information. So it'll be interesting to see as we watch what happens with this metric, if we start to see some changes, because it's trending down just a tiniest little bit. So again, we're really trying to understand what's happening with these data. Thanks.
Right. Anybody who doesn't report to the Workforce Commission is going to be difficult for us to track. Okay. Student debt was also a maintenance goal. So the primary goal there, and there's 2 sub-targets. The primary goal is student loan debt. So it's also taking graduates, and it looks at graduates, and it says, what was the debt load at the time you graduated? And then it waits for you to have a first-year wage, and it says, okay, debt load to first-year wage. And the analysis of that, going back for 10 years before the plan was adopted, is about 60% statewide was the number. So that was carried forward in the plan as a maintenance goal. We didn't want to see that debt load to first-year wage get higher than 60%. It had been stable at that. We weren't asking people to redo everything that they're doing as an approach to help with that. Everybody knows the big problem of student debt and students amassing debt when they get out, and the effects that has on their life afterwards, right? What choices they make as to what kind of jobs they can take, or can they start a family, or can they buy a home, other issues like that. So the way that that's calculated is we have information on student debt reported to us through FADs from all the institutions that report to us. And so each year when the student graduates, we take a look at what their debt load was, and then we wait for them to work for a year, and then we take the first-year wage, and we just divide the two. It's a median on the way we calculate this. So it's not an average over the state. It's literally we take each individual graduate's debt to first-year wage ratio, line them up for the whole state, and take the median. All right? So that way we don't have the outliers of somebody who made a whole lot of money, or people who had a whole lot of debt and don't make money, and that kind of thing, so much influencing. It's represented by the median instead. Any questions on that? Yeah. We don't do it on this particular measure, but we do it on average debt. So that's just a measure that tracks what was the average debt upon graduation. It's not comparing it to first year wage. But yeah, for those students, people were interested in the idea that, okay, when I take a transfer student, how much debt are they bringing with them? And how's that reflective on my institution? So while the plan is sort of student-focused and student-centered, and it's about like how much debt are students coming out of their education with, we were definitely sensitive to the idea that institutions looking at it were saying, well, I can't really control the debt that they come to me with if they're transferring in. So we broke that measure into two pieces. So we still track the overall measure, and we say what the average student debt is, but you can see for students who started at your institution and graduated institution, what was their average debt? And for students who started somewhere else but graduated from your institution, what was their average debt? And so you can break that apart and see that what's happening in each population there.
I think we had the notion that transfer students would have more debt potentially, but at many institutions they have less debt. So, you know, it just depends. Maybe they went to a 2-year institution for a couple of years and then came in. So it's a very different pattern. So to look for your institution to see what the dynamic is with your transfer population.
Yep.
And also, I think for the almanac, we've teased out parent debt. We've had some folks from universities who were interested in having us break that out. So you also are able to see that in the almanac.
Yeah, that's a big difference in methodology that people bring to my attention all the time, is that we include parent debt in our calculation, whereas other people who are tracking this do not, like UT does not, or UT Austin at least does not. No, this is based on graduates, right? So it's those completing. But it's an interesting question as to like what happens to those who aren't completing, and are they leaving? You know, I remember when it was, I don't know if it's a year ago now, when Consumer Reports came out with that one article, their whole front page of their Consumer Report edition was bright red, and it said, my student debt was, or going to college was the worst thing I ever did, or something like that, because they didn't graduate and they had a whole ton of student debt. So it's an interesting question, but this measure, or these measures are tracking completers.
We do show it in the almanac. And the other thing is Jenna and I both got up because we realized those people who are listening in can't hear your questions, so we'll bring you a microphone just to make sure they can hear the questions. And that last question was about whether stop-outs are included. We do have a little something in the almanac,
We do
but
have
as Bill
something
said,
on the
it's not in the
almanac,
plan.
Mm-hmm. You can see it on the student debt profile page in the almanac, where there's a breakout of, you know, you have to pick when to track those people. So it's like a cohort, and then we look at the people who completed out of that cohort, and we look at the people who didn't complete out of that cohort, and we report on the debt for both of them. All right, any others on that one? Let her, if you'll say the question in the mic, that'd be great.
Have you done any work with the debt as it relates to swirlers? So those students who, what you described as a very clean transfer, 2 to 4.
Right.
2 to 4, 4 to 2, 4 to 4, you know, 5
So we
or
haven't
6
broken it out
institutions
that
under.
way. That it's kind of hard. It's pretty hard to do that in the data. But literally the way that the two breakouts work is that if they started with your institution and they ended with your institution, they're considered in the native or same line. Now, if they swirled in the middle, they're still going to be in there if they started at your institution and they finished at your institution. So they're captured in there in that way, but we haven't tried to break them out more deeply than that.
But other would be any pattern. We're not being specific on their transfer pattern. If they started anywhere else, they went to 8 institutions before they completed with you, or they were just one, you know, 2-year to 4-year, any of that group would be other.
Yeah. And it's based on FTIC, right? So FTIC is how we determine whether they started with you or not. If they're not FTIC at your institution, but they graduated from your institution, everybody goes into that other bucket.
Yeah, another tough thing with swirlers is we do have students who will pick up summer courses, so I wouldn't necessarily consider them a swirler, but of course they're going to show up in our data at being at a different institution. And when we get to the excess SCH, we have done a little more with that and trying to look at students who have been at different places. So I'm happy to share with that when we get there if you have questions.
That's a great segue. We'll just go ahead and, unless there's any last questions on debt in general, we'll go ahead and just briefly discuss excess SCH, which is a target underneath the student debt goal. And unless you want to give more background on it, I was just going to leave it at saying I think there's an obvious understanding that if you're amassing a lot of excess SCH, that's likely to go along with more debt. And so the idea that we wanted to focus on reducing the amount of time and SCH that people earn while they're, or at least that they attempt, because this is attempted, that they attempt in pursuit of their degree, then there'll be a corollary to that less debt will be accumulated in that process. Did you want to add to that?
And it's interesting, in the last legislative session, there was a lot of focus on transfer. And in fact, Senator West talked about stranded hours, which was kind of interesting. But we really took a deep dive into some of the data around excess hours and looking at students who transfer and don't. And the other piece we were able to do is we were able to use the CBMOOS, the student schedule data. And for those of you who aren't in IR, that's the data that shows us students in classes, and it includes their grades or if they withdrew. Because we'd had a lot of feedback that, hey, a lot of these students with excess hours, it's because they didn't pass a course, so they needed to retake a course. And maybe these transfers from two-year colleges that just, there were a lot of courses that they just didn't complete and withdrew from. So, I've been saying for years, you've heard me saying it, that we'll be really happy when we've had the S long enough to really track back over several years. Well, now we've had that, so we were able to go back to starting with FY12 when we first started collecting that data and look at the patterns for courses that students passed. And even if you look at courses that students successfully completed, those students who transfer from a 2-year to a 4-year or from a 4-year to a 4-year, because the patterns were very similar for both, even if you just look at courses passed, they still had a lot more excess hours. We also looked at it for dual credit and for courses passed there, and students who had done dual credit and then gotten to a university, even if they stayed at the same place, they had more excess hours in the end, but they did graduate a semester faster. But of course, they'd been doing coursework in high school. So we're really diving into that data, because I think not only the focus on transfer, but also the focus on debt and students taking more courses than they need. It's really important to look at that. And I will also make the case that it's also really important to understand those students, if they have a lot of debt when they're graduating and they did transfer, we want the discussion to not just be about, well, we're just going to look at the debt at our institution. We want it to be about, hey, are we making sure these students have streamlined pathways so that they're getting credit for their coursework? So that's why all the focus on field of study and those types of things is happening. So
I really applaud the additional study, because the concerns that we hear from our leadership and our constituents, frankly, is because we are doing the tough work of being a high transfer institution and a considerable portion of our undergraduates are transfer students, we're assuming responsibilities then for decisions and practices and advising at our colleague institutions. And there's no disrespect intended by that statement. It's just we're being asked to be held accountable for truly practices that may be beyond our control. And one of the suggestions that we've talked about, and we'd love to see you all do the work, is to look at National Student Clearinghouse data if possible and see, let's get to the next level of granularity down and really start to understand that pattern, because we are very, very, very very concerned about the requirement for reducing excess hours when we're not 100% in control of it. And I don't know if my other colleagues around the room feel the same way, but it's a concern I'm hearing very frequently when I share accountability results with leadership.
Yeah, and I do think we need to think statewide in terms of that, and again, think about it being a student-focused plan, because if all institutions are concerned about, we know what we're doing, but they're not talking about what each other is doing, because we have so much transfer in the state, because we have, 34% of our students who graduate with bachelors from universities had done at least 30 hours at a community college, and something like 70% had done at least one course at a community college. Most of our students have hours from different places. We want to make sure they have efficient pathways, that we don't have a lot of excess hours. So a lot of this is about communication, but we also understand it's about looking at the data so we can really understand what's going on. And so we can look at things like when students start at an institution and finish there with our universities, we see a lot of efficiency there, and but we don't see that otherwise. So I appreciate your comment, but we also, I think, as a state and as regions, and most students stay within their regions, as Jenna mentioned yesterday, in terms of transfer. We need to look at this closely and make sure we do everything we can working together to try to help those students, because it's certainly going to help with student debt and with completion, getting students through to the end. So really, really helpful comments.
Also, Jason, just to make sure, if you weren't aware, or if anybody else wasn't aware, that we do the same breakout for excess hours that we do for average debt, in the sense that we show if they started at your institution and they finished at your institution, what the excess hours there are, and if they started somewhere else but finished with you, what those excess hours are.
And that came directly from the accountability group suggestions. So, it's important to come to these meetings and to participate, because we really get important feedback from you about what's going to be helpful, and that's why we show both. To help you have those conversations as well at your institution.
I mean, to highlight the importance of the meeting in this excess hour methodology, it doesn't affect your sector, but last year in our accountability meetings with the two-year institutions, they brought up an issue that was going on with the methodology for excess hours in their group. And one of the things that we identified, and when we made a change to the methodology, was that we weren't removing, when people got two associates or one associate's right after another, it was very difficult to tease apart the hours that were associated with a particular associate's degree. And so we couldn't do that well. So they were concerned that it was overinflating the calculation because we weren't removing those students who had previously earned an associate. So we are now taking those out so that they're not involved in the calculation. And so now you get awarded an associate's, the assumption is all the hours that you attempted during that time are applied to that degree. It's not confounded by having two associates awarded at that time. So that was something that came directly out of the meeting, and we made an adjustment to the methodology for that. We also made another adjustment to the methodology for the two-year sector with regard to what we're comparing to. So the degree program requirements, or the SEH required for a particular degree program. And what we had been using was program inventory here that we had here. The most recent collection in the time that we did the analysis last year was 2013. And we were comparing excess hours to what was in the degree program inventory. But when we got the 2016 information, we found out that everybody was zeroing in on the 60 SEH for an associate degree requirement that had been laid out in legislation that was passed 3-4 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark. And so everybody's zeroing in on that and there are some exceptions, but I'll just make the conversation a little bit shorter, saying everybody's zeroing in on 60, and so we decided rather than trying to individualize each comparison through the program inventory, we just zeroed in on 60 as well and are comparing it to 60, and that was far more what came out of the discussion with the two-year sector in the accountability meetings, that would be far more accurate to what was happening. So we're doing that as well. So the conversations definitely do have an impact, and so if there's something that you guys see, we definitely welcome that as well. Do you want to add to that? Okay. So that was also a way of letting you know that that you might have seen a change in the numbers that we posted on excess hours, because we made that change all the way back to the beginning of the plan, to 2015. So while it didn't affect your sector and the numbers you saw for your sector, it affected the statewide numbers. Okay. Undergraduates completing with debt, that's the final target. Another maintenance at around 50%. We started off the plan a little bit under 50, because when the plan was being developed, I think it was right at 50. And that was the maintenance. But when we got
it may have been at that 49.2. And although I think 49.2 is a great number to put in a plan, I think the committee is not being data detailed people.
Right.
We were around 50. Yeah.
I think it was. If you look in the printed plan, which is a year data before 2015, I guess you could call it the 2014 year that was used when the plan was published. You might see 50%, but the baseline.
We rounded a bit.
Yeah. So that's that has trended down as a state from 49 to 48 to 47, and so overall that's a good idea, right? More people graduating that don't have debt could be a positive, right? But we're watching that very carefully, because we know that what we don't want to see happening is people with debt not graduating, right? So they start falling out of the calculation, because this tracks people who have completed. So we look at grad rates, we look at completions, and when we see completions and grad rates continuing to go up in the right direction, especially we keep an eye on economically disadvantaged, then it lays the case that it's a positive outcome that less people are graduating with debt. But if those start to go in the other direction, we want to be very mindful of the fact that we don't want to see people dropping out and not completing, and therefore the calculation looks like it's getting smaller, but what's really happening could be that people with debt are completing at lower rates, and we don't want to see that. So we're keeping our eye on that, but overall, right now, it looks like it's going in the right direction. All right, any questions about these? It was a more robust discussion than I anticipated on just covering a data update for 60 by 30 text, but I think it was good. And to the extent that people got a better understanding of the goals and why they are and how we're working with them and how we're looking underneath the covers to see what the trends are, and following the questions that people are asking and explaining why things are the way they are, or why we're looking at them the way they are, I think is useful. The other, I just put together quickly a slide on your sector. And I'm not going to go over it. I'll let you go over it. But in general, completions are going in the right direction. Working and enrolled came down a little, but I'm not worried about that at this point. That could just be noise, but we'll keep an eye on that. Student loan debt to first-year wage, that came down a little too. Excess hours going in the right direction. With the discussion of excess hours, we're all very aware that the target in the plan to have no more than 3 excess hours by 2030 is aggressive. People are going to have to work on that. So I'm sure over time there will be more discussion about that and more initiatives, and that might be something that we look at, I don't know, next year or the year after to see how that's going and start really developing a conversation about that. Okay, unless anybody has any final questions about what's going on with the plan or the data or how we're tracking it or anything like that, we're going to move on. Okay. Briefly about the accountability system. Let me check the time, make sure we're on time here. Okay. This is just a background slide that we launched last year. We had a soft launch so that people could get the data and the information out. People could use the system, try it out, give us feedback. We took in all that feedback for the first few months. We got feedback both on the measures and on the actual system itself, so the interface and how it worked, and learned a lot about that, and have a long list of things that we're working through on how to improve the system based on your guys' feedback. So that was much appreciated. In the summer, the final proposed measures were sent to the board for approval. They approved them, and that's when we considered the system as officially launched at that point. We had an approved set of measures, and we had included a lot of the comments that people had made about how the system worked, but that's an ongoing affair. It's sort of like a continuous improvement plan or something for the system. We're continuing to put in many of the comments that we get from people about how to improve things or how to make things easier, and we'll touch on a couple of those as we go through this. We got, as I mentioned earlier, we got all the data entry in, all the data certified in January. And then we had our first rollover in February. So that was another new thing for the system, was to do an actual rollover to a new year and everything that was involved in that. And so we learned things about the system in that regard too that we'll continue to make improvements on. But overall, I think it went pretty well. Everything rolled over, and when we hit the button that said roll over, we had a new year in there, and there were a couple little things that we had to tailor up and fix, but for the most part, it started showing new data, and everything worked as anticipated. Okay, one thing I wanted to mention about that process of data collection that happened in January is that through are people familiar with the, okay, let me take a step back because maybe not everybody knows this. 99% of the data that comes in, that goes into the accountability system, comes through CBM reporting. There is a small amount of data that is not through CBM that is collected through what we call a data entry portal, or an institutional portal that you log in behind a secured system that you can do data entry for us to supplement some of that information for things that were determined not to rise to the level of all the expense it would take to add something to a CBM report, which would be huge. So there's a handful, I won't go through what they all are, but there are a handful of pieces of data that we collect through that data entry. One of the things that we are experimenting with right now is collecting data on the marketable skills goal through data entry. So are people familiar with the marketable skills goal? We need to touch on that one for a second. Okay, one thing I want to say, because this process was really informative to me on how people are looking at the marketable skills goal and wondering how we're going to track it and other issues like that that I wanted to touch on. The goal is pretty simple. You can see it up there on the screen in one line, and the things to key in on are all graduates from all programs at institutions of higher ed in Texas, right? So all the programs need to have identified marketable skills. So somebody asked me yesterday, what did identified mean? Well, I think the word in this goal using identified means that we want you to identify them for each program. It doesn't mean that you're working from a list that we've created on what marketable skills are, and you need to take that list and then make sure that every program has something from that list or anything like that. It's very flexible in the sense that institutions are empowered, if you will, to figure out how to do this in terms of saying, okay, here, let's say you have 100 programs. Each one of them has to have identified marketable skills. Now, what those marketable skills are and how you assign them to each program is something within the purview of the institution. So that's put into your hands. We've been putting together some guidance because so many people have been asking questions on this topic that we have a draft guidance document that's being prepared that's going to come out to discuss how to implement that and how to work with that. We also had a Marketable Skills Conference last year, and there's another one going on next week where all this is being discussed as well to help the field understand, okay, what is this and how are you to accomplish it? Does that make sense? Do people have questions about that? Okay, I'm going to let that go at this point, but if a question comes up, then feel free to raise your hand and ask. Now, the other question I get all the time is, okay, how is that going to be tracked? How are we going to track progress toward that? What are you going to ask us to submit? And that's where we came in with, okay, well, we can use this data entry portal to capture a very high level of information about tracking this goal. And so what we experimented with the first year was asking for a narrative. What are people doing towards this goal? Because we kind of wanted to take everybody's temperature and find out how are people feeling about it? What are they doing? How are they approaching it? And we didn't give a whole lot of specificity as what you needed to tell us. But we told everybody that we weren't going to be posting this. It wasn't for information to send the reporting police after anyone or anything like that. It was just to start figuring out, okay, how is this being digested out there and what are people doing? So we learned a lot from that, and that's part of what helped develop the implementation guidelines that I showed that are in draft and about to be released. And the next year we updated that to say, okay, at the very broad level, we just want to hear about how many of your programs have you done this for? How many have you identified marketable skills for? And so we asked that question. And by the calls and questions that I got back, I realized we needed to tailor that question to be a little bit more specific because some people were confused, and there were two, and easily I could understand, there were two ways to look at it. Let's say that you had 100 programs at your institution and you were working on this goal and you were, and you had 50 programs that, or you were halfway through on every single one of them, but you hadn't fully completed any of them, right? So are you 50% done or are you 0% done? Because no single one was completely done. So we learned that, and so we're going to make that clear in the next time that we're going to internally discuss how we want to perceive that and how we want to ask you to report that and how we're going to do that going forward. But right now the plan is just to do a very high level of tracking on that goal. And that's basically, it will probably show up in accountability, maybe even next year, and it will say by institution, what you report to us is how far along are you on that. Because if you noticed, it's by 2020, institutions will have created and implemented a process to identify and regularly update marketable skills. And then underneath it, it talks also about sharing those with students. So I'm not going to get, unless you guys want to discuss it, I'm not going to get into the idea of why this needs to be done and that students need to be informed of the marketable skills that they're getting in each program and how that helps them. I know that when I went through school, and probably all of us, it was sort of on the student to figure out. You had some discussion about what the marketable skills you might be getting, and it was probably thought of as obvious that you were getting skills. But a lot of students, I don't think, are able to turn around and think about, okay, I got whatever degree it might be, an English degree or a history degree, and how am I marketable? And what skills have I learned, and what can I apply? And so many of those people go on to be really successful in all kinds of fields that you never would have imagined, but making the link for them between what skills they've gotten out of every single degree program and why it's advantageous and how they can market themselves is what this is after. So because of 2020, this is coming up soon, right? And so the target is to be 100% having this process in place where the skills have been identified and they're being communicated to students, and then after that it's a maintenance. Do you have a process for updating that and continuing to make sure that you're on top of it and the skills are looked at every so often for a degree program and make sure that they're still relevant and applicable and the right ones? Yeah, Jason.
Sleeping on the job here.
Do you envision a time when we'll have to provide you with an inventory of each degree and the associated marketable skills? Or is that something that you envision us maintaining almost like our consumer information page where we would have a link off that?
Yeah,
anticipate the future.
Okay, so I have not heard anything about trying to collect that at what you just described. Of course, I can't make promises for the next 14 years or 13 years or however much time is left. But I know that was not something that we were thinking of at all in this process. We wanted to track it at a high level. And the furthest I've heard so far that we might go is the question that we just discussed, and then maybe a narrative box saying, could you describe how you're sharing this with students? And
this kind of sounds like the same process we currently do for gainful employment for these certificate programs, because we have to report the SOC codes associated with those certificates.
Right.
Is this kind of...
So there are similarities there, and I know a lot of institutions, I'm going to show, well, that's a great segue, because we can move forward to this. When the data that we got back on the question that we were able to use, because I already described that the question wasn't as focused as it might otherwise been, but we saw a lot of people reporting 0 because they took the route that I described earlier. We're halfway done with everything, but we're not fully done with anything, so 0. Other people said, this is in the bag for us. We've already done it. It's already part of a process that was in place before. We feel like we've identified marketable skills for every one of our degree programs. It's shared with students. We were good to go before this plan was adopted. And so they reported 100%. I heard that from other people in a similar comment to what you were saying. And that's okay. If you read the guidelines that come out, or if you have anybody at the Marketable Skills Conference, those are good places to discuss that and see how other people are doing it and what the concepts are. But I don't have anything to go out and say, you haven't done an adequate job on identifying marketable skills or anything like that. That was left in the realm of institutions to figure out what are the marketable skills and what's being taught in each program. And I think the underlying assumption is that institutions are competent to do that work, obviously, and you're doing it already in that process that you're talking about, and then making sure that those are shared with students. Like, that's the underlying effort, not to make you do more work or do something new or do it our way or something like that. It was, if it's something new to you that hasn't been done before, then people need to do that, but if it's something that's embedded in a process that you already do, then you can leverage that. And then we would just, you might just be asked to explain, like, right in the box, in a little narrative, like, this is how we did it. Like, when I had this conversation earlier, people were asking me, how do I know that I'm going to pass this test? Or how do I know that I'm going to, that I'm done, or that you guys are going to think I'm done? And I go, well, do you want me to add a box that says you can share your methodology and that'll be it, and then you can feel comfortable that you've explained to us how you did it? Because I'm not going to be in the business of evaluating how you did it and tell you that it was wrong. If you guys have put forth a methodology that you think works and is understandable, then that's as far as we're going to go. That makes sense? Okay, so that's the guidance. I just wanted to throw this up for people watching. If you have more questions about how you're identifying marketable skills, or what they are, or how you're going to apply them to a program, or indicate that they're being taught in a program, Ginger Gossman is the contact for that. When we get to the point of the data entry and asking you, to report to us how many programs are you completed with, how far along are you toward this goal, you could call me for questions. I'm on that one. All right. Any other questions about that? I wanted to make sure that was set. Hopefully it's all easily understood at this point. Features that we added since soft launch to the system, one of the things I wanted to make sure everybody knew about, because we got tons of questions about people wanting to print their accountability reports. That was a feature that was in the old system that while we had it in the requirements for the new system, it didn't quite get delivered the way that there might have been a miscommunication as to what that was supposed to accomplish, and so there was delay in getting that out there. But now we have a version of it out there, and we're still working on it. It's not 100% perfect, but we wanted to make that available for everybody because people wanted to print out their own institutions, all the measures and accountability that are posted, that they could see in all one report like they had been for sharing with their board or their trustees or other strategic planning purposes. So that's out there on the system. I'll show it to you in a second if we have time. And just let me say that we know that it is not 100% final. There's a few formatting issues in it that we're still working on. Tables break in the middle if they go across pages and things like that. That wouldn't normally be what we would want to have out there, but we decided that perfection wouldn't be the enemy of the good. People wanted a report. It was functional, so it works. All the data in it is right. It's just some formatting tweaks. So we'll continue to work on that, and we'll get that done, before next year. One of the things that happened when we launched the system was we launched it with the I don't know if everybody's familiar with interactive capability, but it's where you can go in and download data that's in the system, and you can download it for all the institutions in a particular sector, and you can start working with it yourself. When we started, there were only a few items available in that interactive, and we've continued to build that out, and we'll continue to build that out more. For this sector, we're up to 43 tables out there that you can pull data down from, and it will continue to grow every year until we have everything that's in there available to you in interactive. One of the other things that was confusing for people is that when it was originally launched, if you went to interactive and you looked for data, it would show you every single table that you could pull data from, irrespective of whether there was any data in there relevant to your sector. So you might see in there something that said, oh, that's really interesting, I'd love to see data on that, and then you ask for it and you realize there's no universities in here. So, so we went back and had them put a requirement in that says, okay, when you choose the sector, all the tables that are shown are relevant to that sector and have data for that sector. So now you don't have to worry about that issue. And then we created user guides as well for people to use, and I'll show you those in a second. This is just sort of what the accountability report looks like right at this point. I just picked the very first one, Angelo State, and took the very first table out of it. That's sort of the format. It's fairly nice, and we're going to continue to improve it a little bit. But like I said, if that table happened to be right at a page break, it would break in the middle, which is something that we're going to get fixed. This was just showing you about how you go into the interactive, and it asks you what sector you want and institutions that you want to pull data on. And this was just to show you that now all those tables are relevant to your 2 selections at the top. It can't show you all 40. There's a scroll bar on the right, but it's up to 43 now. We also, under the resources menu on the main menu bar, we have 3 guides for people. The quick start guide is just to show people around and get you using the system and see the main functions and features. If you have somebody new at your institution who you want to start using the system, you don't have to sit down and train them yourselves. You can refer to this guide and let them walk through. It's got a lot of pictures and other stuff like that. Interactive guide is how to use the interactive system and some of the features that are built in there for subsetting data and how you can pull it out and how you can drop it into something like Tableau and in 2 seconds have a visual representation that looks attractive and be able to share that with people. The last one is an institutional portal guide on using the institutional portal and how to get a login and how to log into it and what we ask you to do with data entry each year and how the questions work and all of that. One thing that we added to the end of it in that institutional portal guide was a glossary of the information that we ask you for in the data entry questions. So now you have a reference for, this is, if it's not fully explained in the question or the screen that you go see that asks you to enter the data, you can refer to this, and there's a glossary full of terms that are defined to help you understand what data you want to enter. And I just pulled out a few that are relevant to this, to universities, but there's a lot of information there. Okay, I'm going to skip that part because we're running out of time. One thing I wanted to let you guys know is one thing that's critical for us in all the work that we do, especially when it comes to December and January, is that data gets certified on time. Right? So you'll probably hear about this going into the future. We're going to make an attempt to make sure that everybody is getting their data in. And I don't know how many of you know, but in the CVM reporting manuals, the due date for the fall reporting is like October 15th, and then it's supposed to be certified by December 1st. And a lot of people do well at that, and some don't. And there's a lot of good reasons for why they don't. And so that's totally understandable. Sometimes they've bought a new student information system and things are going awry and they can't quite get there. So somehow we have to navigate that together as a group and try to get that data certified as soon as we can, because it starts dominoing its effect on everything else that happens. People will call me and say, I need data or I need this, and can you share me that? I'm having a meeting, it's important. We're supposed to have it posted for the legislature and the governor in technically at the end of the year, early January. We can't do that if it's not certified, of course. And so that's all I'll say about that. It's totally understandable. We want to work together as a group to try and make that happen, okay? We already discussed the methodology change. So that was about for excess SCH, so I think we already touched on that one. Things that we are looking for next year, the next time we have this meeting that we'll be able to talk about. So those accountability reports will be finalized and people can get a nice copy of the report right out of the system. Something that we're working on right now, I've just loosely termed predefined reports. We're going to start making reports that are accessible to you through the interactive system where it can be either a spreadsheet or a PDF, we haven't worked all that out yet, on topics that we find people asking for all the time, like headcount or annual enrollment or graduation rates. I have 5 identified to begin with: transfer, persistence, forgetting the 5th one. And so what that's going to lay out for people is like by sector, let's say universities, right? And then so the grad rate one, maybe it's the 6-year grad rate. And so instead of where you go into accountability and you see your own institution on the screen, or instead of going to interactive and you download a table or a spreadsheet that has a bunch of numbers and isn't great for working with data but not attractive to present to people, these will come out as, like I was saying, maybe, and I'm envisioning this now, as all the universities listed down as rows, and then maybe 3 years of information, or 3 years of data, like you see when you go and pull up a table on the website, and then the 6-year grad rate laid out for everyone, or something like that, like comparable pieces of information that we get asked for all the time. We're going to start making those available and interactive, so people don't have to actually ask us; it can be there. We're going to add out-of-state peer information that was available in the old system, but we're working on that facility for the new one still. More tables and interactive, like I talked about. One thing that we got asked for, and I don't know if this is relevant to you guys or how much, but the system right now lists institution by name, and so we're going to add FICE to that so that people can do merging and other things like that that are easier with the data that comes out. And then we've gotten comments about, getting around in the system and navigating and other things like that. So we're taking those into account and making improvements there. And then finally, the system, the performance of the system was a little bit slower than we anticipated that it would be. So when people click on things, sometimes it takes a little while to come back. It was not something that we foresaw. So we're building in, and you may have seen some of these already, and they'll continue to get built in, little dials, and I think the one looks like little knuckles tapping on the table. Little indicators like that so that people understand the system hasn't gone away, it didn't crash, it didn't do anything like that. It's just takes a little longer to run to San Antonio and dig out the data and bring it back to you than we thought it was going to be. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to run through some things that are happening, let you guys know, take any questions. You can contact me. If there aren't any questions, I'll turn it back over to Jenna. If there's anything that anybody wants to ask or say at this point, I'm happy to field that. All right, thank you guys.
Thanks, Bill. All right, so next we're going to move into this use of the data in this kind of new top improver analysis. And we're really focusing on completions and grad rates for this. And when we look at, we'll start with kind of a little overview, the statewide look at completions over a kind of a longer time period. And what you can see on these graphs here that we have kind of big jumps. We start at 2000, goes to 2005, 2010, and then every year between 14, 15, 16, 17. So anyway, just be mindful as you're looking at that graph that the time increments change a little bit, but wanted to give you a little bit more detailed information on the most recent years. But what you can see since the start of the plan in 2015, we're up about 27,000 completions statewide. In the university sector, up a little under 20,000. And then when we think about completions, there are really kind of 2 key components to increasing completions. There's both the enrollment growth that grows the number of people in our system coming through the pipeline, as well as the graduation rate, sort of the efficiency with which they're moving through. And so I wanted to give you a little sense of those things. So if we were just looking at the enrollment now, fall head count, statewide, broken out by university and 2-year institutions, you can see that we're up about 40,000 in enrollment. So up 27,000 in completions, 40,000 in enrollment. And when we look at graduation rates, we also see kind of the same positive trend, but actually quite a bit of improvement in graduation rate, particularly the 4-year graduation rate. If you look from 2000 at the start of the Closing the Gaps plan until now, about 20% 4-year graduation rate up to almost 37% in the most recent year. So even though graduation rate is not explicitly a goal or target under the plan, it's an important factor to keep an eye on. So it is part of our accountability system and something that we're looking at closely. So again, improvements in the 5-year as well as the 6-year. But the largest improvement in the university sector is at that 4-year marker. So that's great. This helps with not only our attainment, completion, but also those student debt goals when we have more students completing more quickly. When we break this down and we look at the target populations that Bill referenced, we have our special focus on African American students, Hispanic students, economically disadvantaged students, and male students. You can see that generally we're making this kind of positive, steady progress across each of these areas, but that we really do need to continue to accelerate completions across all of those target populations. And here's just a little bit of state demographic information. The gray bars are the expected population growth in different sectors. That group is Hispanic, is the gray bar. And you can see that there is quite a bit of growth anticipated over that 20-year time period across all age groups. So on the far left, you've got 0 to 17, and then 18 to 24-year-olds, the 25 to 34-year-old population that we're really focused on for the educated population goal, and then older, 35 to 64-year-old, kind of older working population. For African Americans, in the orange, what you can see here is that there is kind of steady growth, but more modest relative to the Hispanic population. And then expect the white population actually to decline in all age groups. So when we compare kind of where our completions are now and where our population is headed in the future, there are important gaps, and we need to continue to think about how to serve the populations that have been underserved and yet are growing in our population. So to go into this top improver analysis, what we decided to do is look at all the completions. We looked at the overall numbers and then also the completions by those 4 target populations that I mentioned. We also looked at grad rates and focused in on, this is the community college slide. So it should be 4-year and 6 years. So excuse the 3-year. No, we aren't assuming you're going to graduate people in 3 years. It should be 4-year and 6-year. And then a new measure of graduates per FTE. And that's a newer measure that came in with the kind of revised 60/30 text accountability system. And what that does, I've heard people say, I don't really even know how to get my mind around what that number is telling me. But what it's doing is saying, we look at all the students you're serving, and what we're trying to do is include part-time students and students who might not be in that first-time full-time cohort group. But we know you serve many students, some institutions more than others, that may not fall into that first-time full-time group. So what we're saying is, out of all the students you serve in a given year, how many students completed? So if you see that you have a 25%, that you're at 25% on that indicator, the way to think about it is about 25% of the students you serve completed in that given year. So if you're a 4-year institution, that's, you'd hope it to be around, great, we got about a quarter of our students out for a bachelor's degree. And so we see a range of different numbers there. But that's the way to think about that. So I wanted to include that in this analysis to give a sense of kind of the full picture of the student population. Again, these are the older slides. We didn't get these all updated. My apologies. So when we look at the universities, not the community and technical colleges, we wanted to focus on not only who is at kind of the top in absolute numbers, but we have a lot of growth that needs to happen over the life of this plan. So we want to learn from the institutions that are on the move, that have made significant progress in the last couple of years, and hear about what it is that they're doing. The way we did these, kind of the organization of these, is to organize, kind of compare by like, and so that is within peer group and within region. Something that I'll mention with region, some of our universities, there are not many universities in a particular region, so we did collapse smaller regions that were next to each other, High Plains and Northwest, for example. That kind of made logical geographic sense. And what we wanted to identify is kind of different groupings. And so what we did is organized into high, medium, low on those 2 dimensions, by peer group and by region. And high would be kind of in the 90th percentile or above, and medium is kind of above 50%, up to that 89th percentile. And we did this for, like I said, completions, looking at percentage change, and for graduation rates at percentage point change. And this may sound like we're not doing, it's not totally different. What I'll say is that when you look in accountability, we display 3 years of data, 15, 16, 17 completions, and then we do a % change listed right there. So we basically just lined those up and sorted them out by peer group and by region. So if you're interested in where you fall and you're not showing up on one of these, it's very easy to go check and see where your growth, what your growth is looking like. So what we did is we're showing here, and I'll kind of go through these a little bit quickly, is we identified those who are in the high group, which is high by peer group and high by region, and also medium high. So either medium and high in region or peer group. So we didn't list everybody here if you are not listed, so we only showed those kind of top 3 quadrants. Again, if you're interested, we have the whole list. We can talk about how people might want to look at those or share those, but it's also very simple to go into the accountability system and just look at your own percentage point changes. And this is for overall completions, okay, for universities. So improvement over that 3-year time period. And we have one of these for each of these metrics. So for Hispanic completions, you can see high, and high, medium. African American completions. Male completions. Oh, everyone's kind of hunting for theirs. You see it? Is it showing up? Economically disadvantaged completions. They're on the web. They're on under the events page for this accountability event. And I'm happy to show you where those are if anybody has a question about where to find those. But on our THECB homepage, under events, you'll see university accountability meetings, and it's posted there. So 4-year grad rates, 5-year grad rates, 6-year grad rates, and then that graduates per FTE. Okay. So then what we did is we looked at institutions that were showing up in that high category on a couple of metrics, and we've invited them to come and share some of their information today. So in this first group, we're gonna have 2 panels. The first is just looking at the completion indicators. And what you'll see here is A&M Corpus Christi. They had high improvements for their region and their peer group in overall completions, as well as African American completions. So they're gonna share with us a little bit about what they've been up to. University of Texas at Tyler, overall completions, Hispanic completions, African American completions, and economically disadvantaged completions, up a lot over the last 3 years. Texas A&M in College Station in campus, overall completions, Hispanic completions, African American completions, and economically disadvantaged completions. And then UT Arlington, Hispanic and male completions. So I'm going to start with inviting the folks from Corpus Christi. Katie, you prefer? Katie, instead of Catherine? Katie Bontrager and Jeannie Gage. If you guys want to come up and share a few comments about your efforts. Yeah. Okay. Please.
I know we had a little bit of confusion about A&M Corpus, so I just wanted to let you know they're doing this a little bit off the cuff this morning. I think there was a little mix-up in terms of the invitations. So they're ready to go, so we appreciate that, and we apologize if something got lost along the way, but here you go. Thank you.
Do you want to? Sure.
So nothing like giving it to the new girl. I've only been here since December 1st, so I have a ton of history, not really. But I did go and talk with different constituents on campus to try to get behind the data. We did look at some of the data. We have some data cleanup initiatives going on as well. So it's all perhaps an illusion. Our African American completions, you know, for us, that's a pocket of diversity. And so we've really been working with the services with our athletic programs, and our athletic program specifically has really stepped up kind of the academic support that we have for our athletes. And we believe that a large part of our success has come from that area. We also have looked at, in our CASA area, some additional workshops and programming for that population as well. So no fabulous big fireworks to tell you about, but that's where we're at.
Anything else to add? Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much. And I just want to congratulate you and thank you for the work that you're doing. So if you'll join me in congratulating the folks from A&M Corpus Christi. All right, and then next we have University of Texas at Tyler, and we have Ashley, Bill, and Cindy Strawn, who actually are supposed to be online, but because of our technical difficulties, won't be able to hear from them today. So I do want to acknowledge the very promising improvements going on at UT Tyler. Next is Texas A&M University, and actually we have someone who's out sick today, so this is going perfectly. So what I can share, though, is that, let me make sure, it's Margot, but let me make sure I have her name correct here. Okay, so Margot Goff was in communication with me, and she prepared these slides, and anyway, she's sick at the last minute. So did want to share some of what they had here. So highlighting some of the areas that they have shown high increases. She points to proactive advising and having all students taking a math placement exam and implementing scheduling and advising platform that I think has provided better student supports in this way, getting people kind of on an early path. Process improvement, looking at goals and metrics linked to student success, and giving those directly to advisors to encourage continuous improvement. And identification and elimination of bottlenecks, and making a leap here, but identifying where sometimes courses are bottlenecks for students. In terms of student engagement, they've been involved in new student conferences and participating in high-impact practices like study abroad, undergraduate research, and learning communities. And then financial education support, looking at financial literacy resources and in-person loan counseling. So I hope that you will reach out to Margot Goff, also David Martin as part of the team that wish they could be here today. And then finally, we'll go back to UT Arlington. And I know we have Ashley Ferguson here, who's going to talk about some of the work that they've been up to. You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ashley Ferguson. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Student Success at UTA. Please forgive me. I got a cheat sheet here on my phone. I made some notes to share with you. So we're doing a lot in terms of student success around retention and completion, like all of you are at your institutions. When we got this invite from Jenna to talk today, one of my colleagues here, Funda, in the back, really took a look at some of the data on a more granular level around Hispanic and male completion, since that's where we've seen our gains. And what's really interesting is that I would love to tell you that we've done these fantastic initiatives that I can share with you specifically for those groups. But really, when we got together and discussed it, it's not that. I think it's just more the collective impact of all of our student success efforts. Now, we're going to have to dig in and see exactly why it's leading to gains in these groups. Sounds like some focus groups are in order for us moving forward. But let me share with you a little bit about some of the things we've been doing. Like many of your institutions, UT Arlington is incredibly diverse. For U.S. News and World Report, we're the 5th most diverse in the nation, tied with a few of you, actually, I think. And so we also are a Hispanic serving institution. We have had some folks go after a lot of the funding that's available for HSIs, and we have been awarded a few grants in that area. One of the grants that we were awarded involves what I'll loosely refer to as a truly focused student development center. So they really work holistically with students, and they recruit pretty heavily transfer and Hispanic populations to participate in those services. And so these students have kind of a one-stop shop where they can get peer mentoring and faculty mentoring and staff mentoring on anything from, I need help with math to I just have no idea how to navigate this whole college process. And so they, again, will really work with the student in a holistic way versus being sent, to all kinds of different places for different services. We also have, I shared with some of you yesterday in our Metroplex group, we've been doing completion grants and audits. So we've been offering, scholarships to those that are right within reach of degree. We've been auditing folks' degrees, and if they fit our university studies degree, we let them know, we can graduate you tomorrow. And that's just taken a little bit of effort in terms of auditing their degrees. We've got nudging and predictive analytic tools that we've put in the hands of the advising community and the faculty for their courses. And so we believe that those are tools that are making a difference. The UT schools are aware we also have a graduation help desk now. That just got implemented, so it's probably not responsible for the gains that we see here, but we hope that's going to make a difference. If you're not familiar with that model, it was started at UT Austin. Basically, it's a concierge contact where a student can reach out, or an advisor or faculty member, whoever, and say, I really need this class to graduate. The seats are full. How can I get in? Or, I'm in my last semester. I just need to register to graduate, but I've got these 2 parking tickets. I can't afford to pay them. These kinds of things. So these folks are designated to work with the student and the staff across campus to take a little bit of extra effort to say, how can we solve this problem and get this person across the finish line? We've also implemented some tools for students to see their degree progress, really map out very clearly their 4-year path to degree. And we think that that's going to help. And then finally, moving forward, we're really going to be pushing several things. We're revamping our first-year course, revamping our academic support services and how we actually strategically target our high DFW areas. And then we're really going to be scaling high impact practice participation. Thanks.
Thanks, Ashley. Any questions for Ashley? Okay. So we're going to take the next kind of 15, 20 minutes, and what I'd like folks to do is, by peer group, chat about if there's anything new or different that you've heard, or kind of where are you in thinking about what strategic efforts are underway at your institution that you think will help contribute to improving completions and increasing the success of students. Wanted to invite one or two folks, anything that you're doing or that you heard someone else doing that you're like, hey, I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna talk to somebody when I get back to my campus.
Sorry, it's hard being extroverted. I really, my colleague from UT Arlington talked about an influencer at Georgia State, and I'm real eager now to connect with that individual and bring that person, maybe not physically, but via video conference to talk with our strategic enrollment committee, because I think that we would probably learn a whole lot. And that was a really good insight to have a name and a place. Thanks, UT Arlington.
Great. Anybody else? One more person. Let's hear something you heard that was interesting in other institutions doing, or something that you think you're doing that is making improvements on your campus. Okay. Everybody had things to say in their small groups. I heard it.
Yes, well, we are just, with Prairie View, we're just starting to use DegreeWorks, and I've just heard from 2 schools that have been using DegreeWorks for a few years, so I think that's a good connection. They don't know it yet, but I will be reaching out to them. And one school is also using Argos, which we use, so I think that's a good resource and lots of experience to reach out to.
Thank you so much. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break if anybody needs to run to the restroom. The fastest way to do that is through this door. Right here. Grab a little water, grab a little coffee. We're going to do one more set of institutional presentations when we get back, and a little more discussion. So 5 minutes and we'll start up. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move forward. It was a little bit longer than a 5-minute break, but I heard so much good conversation going on. I thought, let's just let that happen. Okay, so the next group are our grad rate improvers. And what you'll see on this list here are 4 institutions that, again, were showing up in that high category for region and peer group. And we have Stephen F. Austin, UT Austin, UNT Dallas, and University of Houston downtown in the kind of top improvement category. And you can see the different the different measures that they were in that high category for. And we really emphasize in terms of invitations for this group on the 4-year grad rate in particular. So you may have, so other institutions were in high for some of these, but wanted to, in terms of who we invited this year, focused in that area. So first up, we're going to have Stephen F. Austin and Karen Hall, if you'll come up and share with us what you think is going on at Stephen F. Austin.
So I'm in the Office of Institutional Research, and we work with, as many of you do, a large variety of offices across our campus. And we have the opportunity to see a lot of different activities going on. But for something that occurs at SFA and has historically occurred is our students have indicated, those who are successful and also express a great amount of satisfaction. They indicate that their individual student experiences, feeling like part of a team or a family, is something that is very important to them. And also we've seen in our research, a variety of research results, that that is something that sets us apart from other institutions, both in our state and at the national level. So we leverage those opportunities of individualized experiences to create some student success initiatives that we feel like have contributed to our graduation rate increases during this time period we're evaluating, and hopefully as well as in the future. So I just wanted to highlight a few things, and a lot of these are things probably that you all have going on. Some of them are pieces of information and opportunities that we had for students existing, and then we just enhanced those and created some more individualized opportunities for them. One of the big movements we had was to create college-specific advising centers. I don't know how many of you already have those, but we did not previously have college-specific advising centers. We had college advisors professionally, as well as our faculty were advisors, but we did not have discipline-specific advising centers. And we created those advising centers to allow the students to have a more specific interaction with their discipline group, and for those professional advisors to be able to give the individualized attention that our students indicated was important to them in their areas. And so that appears to have been a successful movement for us, and we feel like in the future will also benefit the students as well. We also obtained an advising tool platform that several others have mentioned in the completions information, and our professional advisors in the Advising Center, as well as our faculty who continue to advise, have utilized that particular tool to create hopefully a straighter vision of success for a particular student in which they're advising on at a certain point in time. We've also enhanced some existing services. We, like many of you, have a tutoring type center. Ours is called the ARC, the Academic Assistance and Resource Center. And we have both individualized tutoring and group tutoring, supplemental instruction groups, and those types of activities. And many of you I know have that as well. We have and we've had that for a number of years. What we did differently was we increased the resources for that particular area. We added staffing. We added different time frames and additional opportunities. We also added the number and types of courses that we provided specific tutoring opportunities for, and we utilized the information each term to tweak that. So we didn't just stay static on the kinds of courses that our students appeared to be struggling in or needed additional help with. We evaluate it every semester and then create whatever opportunities our students need for the particular time. So that's been a different focus or a more specific focus in that particular existing existing piece. Another item that we have, and I'll just speak generally about this, we've had some additional engagement opportunities on the student services side. We've had some community service engagement, and then some very specific lumberjack related engagement items. We have we use the axe handle a lot for things that we do, and we found, as many of you have probably noticed, that when our students are more engaged and have opportunities to sort of feel connected, they actually are more successful, and that's sort of a global issues. But we've increased those opportunities as well as the communication about those opportunities with our students. One additional I guess change, you might say, is we created a student success center that focuses on assisting students with their academic pursuits. And one of the, I just want to highlight there's a lot of facets of that, so I didn't want to go into a lot of detail about everything that center does, but one piece that may be different from other institutional efforts is we have a large population of first-generation students, and I know we talked yesterday in our group, and there was another institution that had even greater proportion of first-generation, but about half of our students are actually first-generation, and that creates some challenges for us in terms of helping those students become successful. So what we did was within the Student Success Center that we created, there's a specific effort that is called Generation Jacks, or we call it Gen Jacks. And what Generation Jacks aims to do is to create sort of an extended learning opportunity for those students that we know need additional help. Traditionally, our first generation students have lower GPAs and lower success rates. And so we have focused those students in the Generation Jacks program, and it's just a select set of students. But we have utilized those services or those new opportunities to be able to create that more individualized attention for that specific set of students. And we found that the students who do participate in Generation Jacks actually do have a higher GPA, higher success rates, and so it appears to be working. Our aim would be to expand that to a larger population of our generation, first generation students, because as you can imagine, when you have a more focused effort, more staffing, more resources, and so forth. So we don't really have the expansion that we want right now for that particular program, but that's something that we'd like to do in the future and are looking forward to that. During the same time period that our graduation rates increased, we also slightly changed our admission standards. It was a slight adjustment and would not have reflected in each one of the rates, but it is reflective in a portion of those rates. So although that's not a student success initiative, that's something that we know affected our rates, and wanted to be sure and point that out. Excuse me. For the future, one of the items that we engaged in that wouldn't be included in our existing reported rates, but we hope that it'll reflect positively in the further down the road, is we incorporated a SFA 15 to finish, which is an effort to focus the efforts of the students to complete in 4 years. And as you might know from looking at data, our average, not our average, but statewide, students don't complete in 4 years, even though that's the desired outcome. So using a promotional activity related to communicating more with the students about what they needed to do to finish within 4 years, we leveraged the College Advising Center in our communications with those areas to try and better educate our students as to what they needed to do in order to finish in 4 years. So we don't think those efforts will be reflective in in our rates that we've talking about today, but in the future we believe they will be. Another effort, the last item I wanted to mention was that several of you in the room have also engaged in an effort from the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, the Reimagining the First Year, and that began in 2016. I think there are around nationwide 44 maybe institutions, and SFA was among those, as well as several of you in the room. And we think those efforts are also going to affect future successful graduation rates or student successes. And some, just kind of briefly, we've looked at gateway courses, those courses which first-time students are particularly concentrated in, and worked on course redesigns, as well as carefully scrutinizing the patterns of success in those courses based upon instructor and discipline and other aspects. We've also created some changes in faculty and staff roles to better serve our students in the first year experience, and some of those are related to the Student Success Center that I just spoke of earlier. And we've also, along with that is additional first-year support services for students. We've tried to focus that more clearly for students and ensure that those students do get engaged and are aware of those opportunities, and mentoring them from a faculty and staff perspective. So those are just some of the things that we think will have affected our graduation rates in the past, as well as hopefully some future adjustments as well.
Thanks. We're going to do all four of the presenters, and then if there are questions, we'll do them at the end. Thank you so much, Karen, and please join me in congratulating the work of Stephen F. Austin. All right, next we have UT Austin. You can see that they had strong improvements in 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rates. And we have Al Walzer, who is here to share with us a little bit about what's going on at UT Austin.
Thanks. I am in institutional research. I am in no way affiliated with student success or enrollment management, but I can report facts. So, that I have for you. So in 2011, President Powers made it a university initiative to improve our 4-year grad rate from about 51% to 70% in 5 years. And as of last year, our grad rate was hovering about 66%. So a lot of the work that was done kind of behind the scenes has to do with student success initiatives department at UT, and really kind of changing the culture on campus to make graduating students on time not only a priority for the university but for the students, because the overall effects will lower student debt. It will allow more students to come in as more students graduate. I just want to talk a couple of things that the SSI folks are doing right now that I know about. In addition to changing the culture on campus, they have something called 360 Connections, which is kind of a group of first-year students that kind of meet and commiserate and then kind of move through the 4 years as a cohort. As was mentioned earlier, we have a graduation help desk that will help students figure out how to graduate on time. And there's also something called Senior Countdown, where seniors will meet with an advisor and kind of commit to graduating on time and then really focusing on that. So by raising the 4-year graduation rate, UT has reduced the cost of higher education for students and families and is able to enroll more students without increasing the overall enrollment. So that's really it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And join me in congratulating UT Austin for the work they're doing. I'm curious, do other institutions have grad rate goals of some kind that they've articulated? Couple, one, two, maybe a couple. Just curious about that. So next we have UNT Dallas, and we have Sam Shee, who's going to share about the improvements in their 4-year grad rate, and he has a couple of slides to share with us as well. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Well, first, thank all of you for coming, and thank you, CB, for making this happen. I'm excited for this 60 by 30 Texas goal. Because this really inspires our institutions to commit our service to the students and also create, unlimited potentials for our future generations. So I really appreciate that. Again, my name is Sam Shi, and I'm from UNT Dallas. Think about I went to Dallas for the interview. I was excited because I was in a border town in South Texas, and I feel like, oh, I'm going to a big city now, and feel so excited. But when I get there, how many of you don't think Dallas is a big city? Okay. In my mind, it's a big city, but when I get there, I cannot see Dallas. But we're young, we're growing, we're the only four-year public institution there. So I think this really significant for a university to be strategically placed there. And I think the UNT system really did strategic analysis on that one and placed the university there. And we're serving the historically underserved population. I mean, if you drive around Dallas and go to North Dallas and South Dallas, it's very different. You feel very different. You know that. So, and the historical reason, and also we're kind of in Dallas, kind of not, because Lancaster is just across the street. So, and most of our students are first generation, and a lot of families they choose to live there, and then they go to our college, and then the socioeconomic status they're in bottom 30%. So that's kind of what we. When I get there, I see this, but right now it's still true. And I am a strong believer that meaning determines existence. I was like kind of disappointed, but you know what? When I got there in 2015, we were going through the strategic planning process, and So here we found like while we are existing here, we have formed a mission to empower students, transform lives, and strengthen our communities. And when we think about it, that's all we need to do. And we want UNT Dallas aspires to be a pathway to social and economic mobility, because as I think about it, we cannot compare with MSU, and somebody told me before they get to their school, they already have a job, so they don't worry about anything. But for us, really, we want this university to be a pathway to the social and look at our goals, and when I look at it, it's very much match the goals of Texas. 60-30 Texas, and we are rooted in the community, and we want to serve the community, and also we want to grow to increase our enrollment, retention, completion rate, and we have the marketable skills in mind. So we want our students to be marketable, to go out and to serve the community, and we want to serve. And if you want to see a metaphor of maybe a growing tree, I mean, you need a root there, and you need to grow, and finally, you need to serve. So that's what we are trying to do, and I was excited. I was in actually because of this mission and this vision we had. And look at our enrollment, and in the past 2 years, and we have 41% growth. So that's one of our goals. If you look at what we're presenting for four-year graduation rate, but if you look at it, the factors that contributed to this, and especially for our 60-30 Texas goal, we need to build a pipeline that is friction-free, that students could come even from middle school to high school, college, university. I think that's very important to reach our goal. So if we don't recruit the students to increase our relevance to the community, that is, what is the point of there? And then students will get discouraged, and it's hard for them to graduate. So to me, for our university, we are focusing on the enrollment growth, and then you need to retain. The retention is important. You would think I'm so selfish to return in this university. I would hope they all return in my university, but the thing is, if you look at it statewide, they could transfer to different universities, and they could go pursue other, because a lot of situations the students they could face in their life. I mean, they have some crisis sometimes in their life, and then they need to change. Well, that's okay. But we're trying to do our part. We're trying to retain the student in our university, and we have from 2016 to 17, we have 66% to 77%. So that was significant. If you look at it, and now we have our degrees and awarded more, and we have the lowest debt upon their graduation. So that's the thing we're doing. If you look at our population in fall 2017 enrollment, we are Hispanic, very, very high population in Hispanic enrollment and African American. We can talk more, but here we want to talk about what kind of things we do in our university to help the students' access and success. And again, these are big things, but I do believe we needed the strategies. We come up with different strategies for different universities. We have low tuition. We haven't increased our tuition for 3 years. And high scholarship. And this keep the debts low of our students. If you think about it, actually one thing I worry about our maintenance goal of this low debt, 60%, is if the tuition keep increasing, and it's really hard to maintain that. And we get low because of our low tuition. And our community partnership. And that's one thing that my president is focusing on very much, and he goes everywhere, and to go to high school districts, community districts, community college districts, and to talk about our university, to let them know that they have these opportunities, that they could come to us. And to build that kind of pipeline I talked about, it to let them come. And then one significant is Dallas County. They have a Dallas Promise. Dallas County offer 9,300 students to 31 high poverty high schools, and offer them community college going free tuition, so they don't have to pay anything. And then after their associate degree in the community college, and if they come us, we offer them last dollar after their Pell. So if they come us, they have Pell, and then whatever left, we pick it up for tuition. So they don't have to worry about their financial things. So this is significant if you look at it, the geography we're serving. So we have block scheduling for the traditional students. And this is one of the initiatives we're trying to retain the students, and it works very well for the past 2 years. And the feedback from students are very well, actually, and they're doing very good. And also, we are in that ASQ reimagining first year experience also. And we offer seminars for our freshmen. As we talk about it with our colleagues over there, and the student service, their first year experience are so important. Once they pass their first year, I mean, they can get their idea. But because of the population we have, most of them are first generation. In their family, probably they never talk about the college, and they don't even know what kind of service I can get, what kind of help I can get from the college. Where do I go to ask questions? And even very small, simple thing you think it's important, it's just too small, but the thing is it affects their first year experience, and then there will affect their success. So we're trying to help the first year students to improve their experience. And we have a lot of non-traditional students. This is one area that we could not ignore if we want to achieve the 60 by 30 TX goal, because if you think about a lot of students, they don't think they're a college student. They're thinking, you know, I'm too old for the college. It seems, but it's no. I mean, we have to be flexible for those students to keep studying in our university. And then we arrange evening classes, Saturday classes, and to meet their needs. So this is one of the things that are very important. And a lot of, and another thing is we give students on-campus jobs. We're trying to let them to work in the university, study there, and to treat the university not only like a place they just get some knowledge, and but also to enrich their experience, their life, and they think, okay, I'm meaningful, I'm working, I'm serving at the same time I'm learning. So thank you again for being here, for inviting us to present. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the work that you're doing at UNT Dallas. Thank you for sharing that. And last but not least, we have University of Houston downtown, and Nasli Dyer is going to be sharing with us some of the work that's going on there. Oh, Carol Tucker, are you coming as well? Yes. It's a party. You can come on.
I feel sorry for the sucker who has to follow that presentation. Thanks a lot, Sam. David, sorry. No, that's okay. Still my. So University of Houston downtown is actually very similar to UNT Dallas in terms of our population. And we were selected for kind of the 4 completion targets, or 2 completion targets, 2 graduate rate targets. And so being a data nerd, I'm also in IR, as is Carol Tucker. We decided to kind of look at the actual rates. So from 2015 to 2017, we saw 37% increase particularly in male completions. And so we just picked a couple of strategies that we thought may be related to particularly male completions. And so one thing that our university has been doing, I think since 2014 or 2015, is the Men of Legacy program. And so this came out of the Male Minority Initiative, where we have a director who's going out into high schools and recruiting minority males for this program. And I wrote down the acronym. So it's Leadership, Excellence, Grades, Access, Collaboration, and Identity. And so this also incorporates like a mentoring program. And currently, this affects transfers and FTIC students. And so for the 2015, 16, and 17 rates, this would be primarily related to transfer completion versus FTIC completion. Another thing that we're doing is a lot of these many of you have already talked about. So Academic Support Center, which houses our tutoring for both lower division and upper division courses. And we've increased the number of advisors. And so advisors are really reaching out and helping our male students with their particular needs. And you can see that our female students are kind of graduating at higher rates. And so we're still trying to close the gap between completion rates between our males and our female students. So the other completion metric that we have started to see increases in is whether or not is Pell, we call it Pell, so whether or not they're classified as economically disadvantaged. And so many of our students qualify for Pell. I think it's like 70%, close to that come through the door that qualify for Pell. So we also saw an increase in this from 2015 to 2017 of 29% in completion. One reason we think that's related to this is affordability. I think tuition for the year for a full-time student is about $6,000. And so we're one of the lowest rates in the state. Another thing that we think may be related is accessibility to degree evaluation. So we use CAP, and our students can really look and look at their degree map kind of throughout the course of their major and see, make decisions on courses based on that. And so we think this may have reduced like the number of excess courses that students may register for or be taking. We incorporated UHD fixed tuition in 2015, I believe, where students can sign up for this once they enroll at UHD in their first year, and they can keep the tuition rate the same through the course of their degree plan, which we think may help students who may need Pell. And then this one in kind of like the lighter blue, these are things that we're starting to incorporate that maybe not be related particularly at this point to this completion rate, but that will be related to increases in the future. And so it's $1.5 million in retention scholarships, and this is something we call Be on Time grants. And so students who are making progress and that they're completing 30 hours a year, 15 credit hours, you can do it in fall and spring to get your 15 hours, and you have to maintain a GPA, I think it's 2.5. To be eligible for that grant, and it's automatic. If you meet those criteria, you get, I think it's $2,000 a semester or a year, one or the other, and I think it's a year. So I think it's $1,000 a semester, and you get that automatically. Currently, this is only helping our FTIC students, but they're looking to expand this to our transfer population as well. Another metric we've seen improvements in is the percentage of graduates as percentage of FTE. This has gone up, and so some things we think may be related to this. We went through this really big course redesign for barrier courses for our students, and we've incorporated it into interdisciplinary studies where we have students who they may have credits that aren't particularly in a degree that they transfer in, and these courses don't necessarily tie in with a degree, but they can plan kind of their own path to a degree through university college and using the interdisciplinary studies path. We have a transfer seminar for students, upper and lower division tutoring, I already mentioned, intrusive advising. And so one thing that our advisors have done recently is that they're doing a lot of call campaigns with students who look like they're on their way to graduation and trying to get them into a degree, or, hey, you have all these credits and they're not really related to anything. Is there something that you're more interested in doing that would help you get this degree this year and would, get you on your way to a job? Major declaration, we started, so there's particular rules for this, and I wrote them down. I think it's like after you have, if you're FTIC, if you have 45 hours, you have to declare a major, and if you're a transfer student, you must declare no later than your second regular term at UHD. So this is really to help students get on a path to whichever career that they want to choose. And then these ones are things that we're doing in light blue that we think will affect our future completion rates, and so we're currently in the process of redesigning our transfer orientation and our online orientation, which I saw and is terrible. And so we're trying to get that revamped so students aren't just pressing next, as I would do, because it's really boring the way that it's currently set up, to try and really get them involved. Another big thing that's a really big project that we're doing is implementing EAB, predictive analytic tool. And so I'm particularly going to be heavily involved in that. And we're hoping that we can target students earlier. We kind of have, at least for FTIC students, an in-house scrapped together predictive model that I created. And so we just kind of just like the ghetto version of whatever EAB will do for us. But we started kind of thinking about that. And then enhancing the transfer website. And so right now there's not really a place that transfer students can go where they're getting all the information that they need, like what the processes are to get in, what they need to do to release their financial aid. There's just a lot that transferring involves, that there's not like one place. So that's a complaint that we've gotten from a lot of our transfer students. There's not like one place they can go and say like a checklist, okay, these are the 17 things I need to do. This one we were actually excited to see. I don't know that we realized that we were improving in our 5-year graduation rate for FTICs. We just hit a larger than 20% graduation rate for our 6-year graduation, and that has been historically low. And so that sounds really sad, and UT Austin made us feel horrible about ourselves with that graduation rate that they shared, but can I move past it? So we're very encouraged by seeing this. increase in the 5-year rate, and we're also seeing an increase in the 6-year graduation rate. So we do a lot for FTIC students. There's a freshman seminar. We have supplemental instruction, particularly for college algebra, which is a barrier course. We hired a director of FTIC retention services, I believe in 2015, and she's been awesome and just like really putting out campaigns, calling students, contacting students. I started in 2016. I'm not saying that's like a causal thing, but so I work closely with the director of FTIC retention, and so I help her kind of target students, find groupings of students that we can target, particularly with our FTIC group, that look like they're at risk based on whatever they come in with, some of the other indicators that we use. And then these things in blue are things that we've started doing currently and we'll continue to do, and we hope to see these affect our future rates. So the Academic Surge Program is something that we do for our probation students. I believe it's like a 3-hour, it's not really a course, it's like a 3-hour seminar workshop that they sign up for with our director of, I don't remember Alvin's title, but it's like, he's also in the Success Center. And so they have to sit through a 3-hour course with Alvin, and he helps them understand like time management, things that, realizing what went wrong, what happened, why are you on probation, how can we help you get off of probation. And so they do that. We implemented Gator Success Coaching actually for the first time in fall 2017. And this was really cool because on our predictive analytics side that's in-house, we were able to identify students that may be the most benefited from a success coach. And so we did this using a predictive analytic model that I built and mapping that to students that are working excessive hours. So that's a really big issue at our institution. Even in our FTICs, I think like 70% of our FTIC students told us they were going to work at least 11 hours, many of them working 21 or more hours. We also, this year, we asked it a different way. We said, okay, you're working maybe 11 hours, but how many days are you working? Because if you're working 2 hours every day, that's still a commute. And you guys know, some of you know Houston, it's huge. If you're commuting from your job to here to back to work, back to home, like it's a long day. When are you studying? How are you incorporating that? And so we launched a pilot program with our Gator Success Coaching Center where we gave them these students that were working 21 or more hours and were identified as being high risk for academically. And so they've contacted those students, they brought them in, they worked one-on-one with kind of, oh, sorry, I'm taking too long. And we're starting to see really good benefits of that. So that's kind of a unique thing that we're doing. We have a really great orientation program for students. Mentoring is quite large at our school. I think about half of our FTIC students sign up for mentoring, and so they have peer and faculty mentoring. I think that's changing next year, and we're just doing peer mentoring. But that's also contributing to a lot of the success. Summer restoration program is something that we pick barrier courses that a lot of our students fail, and we offer those courses in the summer and encourage students who have failed those courses to take them so that they're not, because many times they are part of whatever they need to take the next course in the series, prerequisites. And so we offer those so that they can move into those upper division courses. And then we have a Scholars Academy and Honors. And this one is just to kind of show, it got a little mumbled, but we're doing a lot of things for FTIC and transfer students separately, but then many of the things that we use are benefiting to both FTIC and transfer students. And so we're hoping that a lot of this programming is building on the completion rates for both populations. Okay, I'm sorry, Ariana.
Thank you. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. So because of time, we do want to get you out on time, but I do encourage you to chat with any of the speakers who are here today if they had something that you were interested in learning more about or reaching out to them subsequently. I heard a couple of things, and we'll just open it up for some comment as well. Some of what I heard as I listened across, yesterday we did something similar with the two-year institutions, and listening here today, some of what people are pointing out, sometimes it's kind of a special initiative with a special name, but sometimes it's just the regular work of building in better data tracking or changing the way you're doing advising. So sometimes these more systematic things that take a couple of years to take root, and people are seeing the fruits of those labors, and we can see that manifested in the data. And so want to acknowledge that some of this may not see the light of day, but we're hearing kind of about some of these systematic changes that are built into kind of regular budgets, regular ways of working, but in a new way. Also heard a couple of times that some of this work, even though you're seeing high impacts for African American students or Hispanic students, sometimes they're not programs targeted specifically to those populations. They are just systematic changes that are happening that are raising all boats, and you're serving students, so they may have higher impact for those students based on their needs. Also heard a lot about using data to target, thinking about predictive analytics, but even not all the way to predictive analytics, but learning from your data, what are kind of the leading and lagging indicators that you're looking at. And several people in email said, I was surprised to find out I was high in this area. I didn't know that, let me go back and look at my data and check that. And so hopefully this kind of gave you a new way to look at data, to think about. And what I hope you heard today is representation from different kinds of institutions, different missions, different peer group, and from all across the state with different contexts, different populations. So hopefully it gave you a good breadth of information, and that you will take some of these ideas and think about the applicability to your context as well. So again, just want to thank everyone who shared today as well. So this is something we're going to evaluate. We want to know, what did you think of this process, and was this useful for you, both the data side and kind of hearing from institutions? So you should have an evaluation email in your inbox right now. Cue the email. And so ask that you take a minute. It's very short, 6 or 7 questions. It should take you about a minute. If you'll just go ahead and complete it for us before you get up, that would be fantastic, so we can hear about how this worked for you and make improvements for next year. And also wanted to preview for you that transfer keeps coming up as a big issue and topic. And so we may be looking at or thinking about doing kind of some transfer indicators as some of the focus discussion. This is, we think, kind of an important piece under the completion goal. But thinking about core completions, field of study completions, we see with, in terms of all the transfers that complete, we have about 3% of students who are completing with a field of study right now. That's something we're working really, really hard on as an agency to prioritize. And so we're working on building out the top 25 majors, highest enrollment majors, to articulate the courses, lower division courses, kind of not just making sure that courses transfer, but they're actually applying to a particular degree program. So that's something we want to make sure there's accurate reporting on, and that we're kind of sending the message. This is a big priority for us, and want to focus on some of those indicators for next year. So hopefully there'll be some surprise, hooray, you're in the top next year, and invite you to engage with us again next year, and think about the people. As we said at the beginning, it's kind of a different mix of people in the room this year. So hopefully that worked for folks. I mean, definitely IRIE. And then I heard from one of the institutions that she's from the financial aid side of the house, and so she doesn't normally come to this meeting, but it's interesting to think about how the data are pertinent for her work. So as you go back to your institution and kind of debrief this experience, think about where you or others might benefit from this kind of conversation next year. And then finally, I'm going to turn it over to Julie for any closing remarks that she would like to make. But again, want to thank you for your time, effort, and all you do every day to make students successful in the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenna, and for your hard work putting all of this together today. And there was a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes, and I know Luis Martinez was involved with that as well, in terms of looking at the data in a little different way than we have in the past. And I think this is going to be really useful moving forward for us to be looking at those institutions that are really making progress, or especially compared to their peer groups and where they've been in the past, as opposed to just focusing on, hey, these are the institutions that rise to the top overall. So it's important to look at all of it, but I think it takes a little extra time and effort to look at it with that level of granularity. So thank you for that. I did also want to quickly mention, I realized we hadn't talked anything at all about the negotiated rulemaking that happened here at the agency. There were several people, I think, in IR offices that were involved, and it was around our required 5-year data review. And we have removed some data elements from our CBM collection as a result of that. We're going to be going forward with some legislative recommendations to move some reporting as a result of that. But the other thing that's going on, and I just thought it'd be good for you to be aware of it, is that we have a work group coming in. We got nominations. They're going to be looking at the data we collect on the IFRS and the FADs, and also through the college student budget, and make sure we've got definitions clear, see if there's anything we don't need to be collecting anymore, and also looking at some reconciliation. So if you hear something about that going on at your institution, or that we're sharing some data and asking questions about that, you'll be familiar with the fact that that came as a result of this negotiated rulemaking group, and really the interest in making sure we're very clear in terms of what we're collecting, and we're only collecting what we need, and that our data match, because we do get a lot of governor's office and legislative data requests that we fill with the IFRS data, or we collect, again, some of it in student detail and FADs. Doesn't always match. It'll be set-asides, exemptions and waivers, those types of things we get a lot of requests for. So thanks for any support you can give on your campuses if you hear about those efforts, and thanks to everyone who helped us look at some of our redundant reporting or unnecessary reporting so we could clean some things up there. So we're trying to work to help you out, because we know you have a lot of burden in terms of the reporting that's required. So. But moving back to the accountability system and all the good work we've done today and the regional targets, thank you again very, very much for participating in that. Please do contact your regional point of contacts as you move forward with those meetings. I know I'm heading up to beautiful Plainview, Texas this afternoon, so I can participate in a meeting with the High Plains region. But again, it's just really fun to see all this activity happening, see the progress that's being made, see the connections that are being made, and I think it's going to make a really big difference in terms of reaching our statewide goals. So thank you for that.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good trip home. And if anyone had marketable skills questions, the Ginger Gossman is over here to answer any questions you may have. So say hi to her on your way out and fill out that evaluation for me. Thank you so much.